So if you've learned some Japanese, you've probably learned that anata means you. And hopefully you also learned that we rarely use anata, if at all, because it can sound abrupt, intrusive, or aggressive. Let me give you an example of a Japanese conversation.
病院行って
行ってきた美容院うちに切ってもらってきた。
あ、うちに切ってもらったの？
そうだよ。
あ、切ってるね。
遅くね。
どこ切ったの？どこ切ったの？
だいぶ切ったよ。
やってるよ。
いいじゃん。
本当に？
So here you didn't hear any anata because we have our own ways of phrasing things in Japanese. The guy said, あ、切ってるね, which means, oh, you got a haircut. 切ってる just means having cut or cutting. And that is something that we often add when we share information or observation. So there's no you here, and there's no hair here either. In Japanese, we typically don't say things that are obvious from the context. Here, it's obvious that they're talking about a haircut. You can watch the entire episode or even entire season, and it's very unlikely that you hear anata. And even the very unnatural textbook like Minna no Nihongo acknowledges this. So think about the fact that some apps with cookie cutter lessons still use you. They really don't care about how we actually speak Japanese. So if you want to learn Japanese with me, I will teach you the kind of Japanese that real-life Japanese people today actually speak. So click the link in the description and subscribe to my email group. I will give you another example.
わ、可愛らしい声ですね。
ななこです。
So he said, 可愛らしい声ですね. You have a cute voice. 可愛らしい, cute, 声, voice. This makes the sentence respectful, and we've already talked about ne, which we often use when we share information or observations. Again, there's no anata here. In English, you can actually just say cute voice, and they will understand what you mean. But in Japanese, this way of speaking is the most common one. I will give you yet another example.
すごい変なこと聞いていいですか？好きな味噌汁の具って何ですか？
うわ面白い。
She said, 好きな味噌汁の具って何ですか? What's your favorite miso soup ingredients? 好きな favorite 味噌汁 miso soup 具 ingredients. So there's no anata here. In English, it's gonna be pretty difficult to express this without using you. What are your favorite miso soup ingredients? In some situations, you could probably just say favorite miso soup ingredients, and they will understand from the context, but that's not how you typically speak English. But in Japanese, this is pretty much how we say it. But what if you want to address somebody directly in Japanese? What would you say? Here's an example.
森さんは
はい。
どういう女性と結婚したいとかあるんですか？
自分のか
She said, 森さんはどういう女性と結婚したいとかあるんですか? Using the guy's name, 森さん. And this is a very typical way of addressing somebody directly. And do you remember the miso soup example? 好きな味噌汁の具って何ですか? And you can also say something like, 森さんの好きな味噌汁の具って何ですか? If you really want to add something like 森さん. We also use somebody's role, such as 先生, teacher, 先輩, お兄ちゃん, big brother, お姉ちゃん, big sister. Interestingly though, there are some roles that we don't really use this way, such as 弟, little brother, 妹, little sister, 後輩, underclassman, 生徒, students. Here's an example.
先生。先生は不倫とかしてないですよね。
He said, 先生は不倫とかしてないですよね. Using the word 先生. And you can replace 先生 with other roles such as 先輩 and say 先輩は不倫とかしてないですよね. And that's perfectly fine. But what if you want to talk to a stranger? Again, you don't really have to use anything, but sometimes people use words like お兄さん big brother, お姉さん big sister to address strangers. Example.
日本人は変態だし、みんな変態だし。
お兄さんも変態ですか？
変態ですね。
そうですよね。
So I was interviewing them and they asked me, お兄さんも変態ですか? Are you a pervert as well? because we are both men of culture. And hentai in Japanese actually just means pervert. It doesn't mean pornographic manga or anime. And you can use onesan for girls this way. But these words don't really mean you. They are roles and descriptions. But we do have words for you, such as Anata, Kimi, Omae, Kisama. And some people, especially guys, use omae with their friends, like this.
どうだったバイクは？
最高
最高
じゃあ
最高
最高ってお前はいつも乗ってんだろ。
バイクいいね
He said, お前はいつも乗ってんだろ using the word omae. But you should be careful with omae because if you use it with strangers, it can be incredibly insulting. He can do it because he's friends with them and probably also because he's older than them. But if you actually want to insult someone, you can perfectly use omae, like in this example. So these are angry men. They actually said ome as in ome wa achi ittero. And ome is a contraction of omae, which kind of makes it even more rude. So if you want to insult somebody, say ome. Now, I said that we very rarely use anata. And rarely doesn't mean never. Because there are some situations where some people might use anata. For example, if you're writing a survey question, it's actually pretty common to use anata, like in this example. The way we write Japanese can be very different from the way we speak Japanese. You can also find some people who use anata in person, like this.
いや別にだって仲がいいも何もだって知らないもんだって俺はあれなんですよ、普通にあなたと一緒で捕まったから15年ぐらい前になんで
He said, 普通にあなたと一緒で捕まったから using あなた. I've heard him say anata a few times in his videos, but he doesn't say it very often. I had to go through many of his videos to find this example. So even with somebody who uses anata, it can be relatively rare. And you might have heard that wives use anata with their husbands like this. So she said anata to call her husband. But as far as I know, people today don't really do it. It's quite outdated. And since anata can sound very aggressive, people are more likely to use it when they are arguing with somebody. Here's an example of a Twitter argument when somebody uses anata. So there are some situations where you can use anata, but it's absolutely not necessary to use it to speak Japanese. And personally, I never use it. And if you are a beginner, it's better if you avoid it. Just stick with how average Japanese people speak Japanese because I will teach you the kind of Japanese that real-life Japanese people today actually speak because textbooks and apps don't represent real-life Japanese. So click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yusa.